This week, we dive deep into Star Wars' most controversial film, The Last Jedi, right here on the High Ground Podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining me to have this conversation about The Last Jedi. This is literally what I wanted to do when I started the podcast in the first place. Yeah. So, and I've been trying to do everything I can to sneak in little like micro discussions about it throughout the time, and so now we are here. But I want to start by and then also just for housekeeping purposes, I'll be essentially going in a circle. I start with a different person each time, but you will always go after the same person, if that makes sense. But yeah, if you do have other points, you can feel free to jump out and we'll talk about them as well. But let's start by asking, who are you? Why do you like Star Wars? And also, I want to hear a top three. And I'm going to my dyad pep first.
I'm Element7 on TikTok, or just in social media in general. I'm a Star Wars content creator. I get into tiffs with Power Rangers and also educate people with Star Wars lore. Why do I like Star Wars? Because it's just the best. The underlying themes in each movie, and then the underlying themes of the entire franchise is just hits home constantly with each new movie. Just in general, Star Wars is like my bread and butter for fantasy world building and character driven stories. But each movie has each movie has a more focused theme throughout. Every time you watch a different movie, there's something different to think about and to reflect on. My top three, it probably only diverges from your own by one, which is Empire, The Last Jedi, and Revenge of the Sith. And I think after this discussion, it may shift a little bit.
We were just talking before you jumped on that, at least with Mateus, and I mean, I know where this already ranks for Brooke, but after my latest watch, I was like, all the things that I thought I didn't like really weren't an issue, like pretty much at all. And so,
same.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump back into it. How about you, Brooke?
Well, my name is Brooke. I'm BDazzler on TikTok. That's where I post most of my stuff, mostly Star Wars things. Star Wars it's a lot. I think it's especially special to me now because it's gotten me through like some really tough years, especially in my adult life, especially 2020. I'm sure a lot of us feel the same way. It's been just like something consistent. And the more I like dive into it, the more I love it because there's just so much. I don't think you can you can't know everything, even if you spend your entire life like studying it. So it's just really awesome.
Challenge accepted.
Well, maybe you guys can, but I don't know if I can get there. It's just been really special to me, especially this last year. And I love all of the connections I've made because I don't have a lot of people in my real life that are big Star Wars fans other than my partner. So I just love it. Oh, and my top three, The Last Jedi is my number one. I battled with that for a while. And then I think earlier this year, I was like, nope, it's my number one, and I'm just going to stick with it. And then Empire is my number two. And my head says to put Return of the Jedi third, but my heart is putting Attack of the Clones. So that's where it's going to go.
Nice. I love it. I'm almost contemplating once I finish all the movies to start the order back up again and just have different people on for those episodes. Because there's some movies like Attack of the Clones where now I know a whole bunch of people that love the movie, but at the time that was I don't know, my fourth or fifth episode, and I didn't. So That's awesome. Also, in case anyone wants to look really fly or needs awesome gift ideas, I see someone has some amazing clone trooper earrings. Are those clone?
Yeah, I wear Captain Rex today.
Yeah. So yeah, Brooke also makes and sells those too. But we'll plug your store a little bit later. And last but not least, Mateus, your go.
Yeah, I'm Mateus Ward. I'm an actor. I have recently fallen blast backwards into the Star Wars TikTok community, and I couldn't be happier. On TikTok, I'm just Mateus Ward. I'm Mateus Ward on everything, on all social media platforms. But I do impressions, and I do kind of little skits on TikTok, and I started to lean way too heavily into Star Wars, which got me meeting all these fools, and wouldn't have it any other way. But yeah, so I am a lifelong Star Wars fan in the most literal sense. My dad, he wanted the first thing I ever saw to be Star Wars. So first film a little baby Mateus ever saw was A New Hope, before I could even comprehend it. But subconsciously, I knew it was already doing wonders.
You merely adopted Star Wars. I was born.
I was born in it. I was by it. Yeah. So there's no me pre Star Wars. It's a staple and a constant in my life. It's something I love dearly. Why I love it, I think it's a wonderful mixture of escapism and a place to talk about real issues. I think with sci-fi and fantasy in any sort of story, there's always a wonderful ability to talk about themes and to question your world without having to kind of be confronted with the fact that that's what you're doing. It's usually, Star Wars has never been super subtle about it, but it's very subliminal. It's very subconscious. It's very abstract. So I've always loved that. I've always loved Star Wars because it was this idea of you bring us into this universe covered in dust and destroyed by an empire and say, now let's find the hope in this. And I think that's what Star Wars has always been about, is it's a galaxy draped in tragedy, and it's about the people who find hope within that tragedy. So that's why it's important to me. Top three are in constant flux. Every part of me who grew up with the original trilogy and didn't watch the prequels until, a little bit later, and kind of was able to create my own world of what the prequels are. And I'm very based in the original trilogy and have now recently started to explore my love of the prequels. But first thing that always comes to my head is episode 5, 6, and 4. Those are my favorites. But recently I've opened it up to really finding the movies that bring me the most joy, and and I really like the most and are most rewatchable for me. And it comes down to Empire Strikes Back is kind of always going to be my first, and then Rogue One, and I've found that Last Jedi and Return of the Jedi I could turn them on and watch them for the rest of my life, and I would be happy either one of them, so it's hard to pick between those two. But recently, again, because it's always in flux, just watched Last Jedi. That's where it's in that third place right now.
No, I feel you. Like, I was having that same struggle myself because, like I said, that they always change, especially doing this podcast. They have already shifted for me. I actually. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, in the vein of meeting new people, thanks to Star Wars TikTok, I want to start saying this when I meet someone new. Found someone you have, hmm?
Found someone you have.
For me, like for instance, Rogue One used to be dead last on my list. A lot of people find that strange until I did the Rogue One episode, and then I saw some of these extra things that I just never saw before. So yeah, for me, top three have been for the longest time it was Empire, Return of the Jedi, the Last Jedi, and then earlier this summer, the Last Jedi jumped up. And I fear it might make another jump after this, but yeah, we will definitely see. But I do agree with you, Mateus. I mean, Star Wars has this, it's wrapped up in a very simple child's power fantasy, good and bad, story. There is all these subtle nuances and depth that is just suddenly there out of nowhere. And that's something you can keep uncovering, and it helps us it helps us all to grow. It certainly helped me through this year, it's been a weird year. But you guys have all been awesome. I'm stoked I found you guys. Now that we're through all the mushy stuff. All right, so quick lightning round, because we really want to get into the meat of this. So how did you feel walking into The Last Jedi, and how did you feel walking out? Brooke, we're going to you first.
Okay. Well, Star Wars wasn't something I grew up with, so I didn't start to really be invested in it until after I saw The Last Jedi in theaters. It was my first Star Wars movie I saw in the theater, so I think that's also why I hold it so close to my heart. So I think I had watched The Force Awakens at some point with my significant other, sort of before The Last Jedi came out, and I was I knew I wanted to go see it in theater because he is always been a huge Star Wars fan. We actually found his original movie ticket for Revenge of the Sith, hiding in a bunch of stuff when we were moving, which was awesome. But coming out of it, I felt like I was run over by a truck because of the roller coaster of emotions that I went through. And movie theaters are usually really cold, but I have never sweat so much in my life, not exercising, being in the movie and seeing it. So I loved it. It was great.
Awesome. All right. So that was walking into it. And then how did you feel walking out of it?
Walking out, it really gave me it really just sparked my love. And I really I went back, I think the next day. I wish I had gone back to see it again because I feel there's so much that I missed, but I ended up going and just rewatching all of the originals the next day, leading up to I graduated college 4 days later after I saw it. So I just spent that whole time, because I was done with finals and stuff, just watching all of the originals over again, rewatching Force Awakens, just immersing myself in it. So it really sparked my love for it.
Nice. I love it. And Mateus?
Yeah, walking into it, every time a new Star Wars movie in the Skywalker saga comes out, I do a full rewatch of the films. And so I did that before this. So super hyped, always, for a Star Wars movie. And this movie was really jarring. And it very much makes you feel things that you don't want to confront. But I remember leaving the theater really emotionally satisfied. Maybe satisfied isn't the word, because that's not necessarily what they're going for. It's more of as a film fan, I was I just went into a Star Wars movie and I used all the parts of my brain I would use to watch Citizen Kane. And that was a really cool experience. It was really interesting to be challenged and this movie tears apart at all your favorite things and it really has, and when I watched it the first time, I absolutely adored it, and I love that about it. Then I went online, and,
and then the Fire Nation attacked. No,
the Fire Nation attacked.
No, that's all good. And how about you, Element?
A couple of things walking into TLJ. I was, of course, worried about Luke Skywalker, right? Because the last time we saw him, they just ended on his face and he didn't get to say much. So I was 100% invested in where he was at his life and what he was going to do, what kind of training he was going to instill into Rey. And I was hoping that she was going to be a Kenobi, that they would, connect some dots and throw in some Easter eggs that would connect all the way back to Obi-Wan. But I left having all of my expectations completely subverted, and I loved it. And I didn't expect we would get so much of what we got, that it kind of reinvigorated and kind of rekindled my flame for lore and the world of the Force so much more. I didn't expect it. So when I got it, I was just like, as soon as I walked out, I was like on my phone ordering the visual dictionary and all of the companion reading material just to get, there's got to be some stuff that I missed now that we know about the Prime Jedi and the Temple on Octo. I had to know everything. And especially with Snoke and what he reveals about Kylo as well. So yeah, expectations completely subverted. And what I got was just magical.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of close to me, because walking in, I really enjoyed The Force Awakens, right? I had seen it a number of times in theaters. And we just had no idea what to expect, what was going to come next. And, as much as I enjoyed The Force Awakens, it was a little too easily digestible, if you ask me. It was like a nice juicy hamburger, but I really wanted steak, and this movie was steak for sure. And Mark Hamill's performance was incredible, and every scene was iconic. You could print out just about any scene of the film.
And it's
I don't even know how that's possible. Yeah, I have no idea how it's possible to frame everything that well. But yeah, I loved it. And as soon as it ended, I'm sitting in my chair. I was like, oh man, people are going to love this film. I literally, I looked over to my buddy. I saw it with, that's exactly what I said. People are going to love this. So... jumping into the film, and I really want to kind of, I mentioned it before, but go through this part kind of quick and talk about little scenes that jump out at us. We're going to really dive deep into each individual character's journey. This one's a little bit more complex because, much like a Timothy Zahn novel, there's 3 very distinct storylines happening simultaneously. So we will we'll jump into Act 1. We have the opening crawl until Luke finally agrees to train Rey, until Poe sends Finn and Rose on the side mission, and that's when Finn and Rose go on the side mission. But we'll go to Mateus first.
The beginning of the film, again, they start off at every turn. They find ways to subvert your expectations. You're ready for the movie to start with Luke grabbing the lightsaber. That's kind of where your mind is at, because that's where it left off. You start off there. Then you see Poe and you're like, oh my God, we're going to get an awesome scene of Poe being a hero. And like in the first movie, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, what are you doing? Or you agree with him and you're like, you're in that mode, but there's immediately visually, not even within conversation yet, there's a conversation that's being had about ethics in war. And it's so powerful. And also a little earlier than that, you get this really disarming comedy scene. The movie starts off with a gag. And it was off-putting for a lot of people, but for me, Star Wars is funny. It's always been funny. It starts off with C-3PO and R2-D2, bickering. It's what that's Star Wars is. It's camp. It's pulp. It's pulpy, and I really like that. But yeah, I think there was definitely reservations because your guard goes up once stuff doesn't go exactly how you expected. And I think that's what a lot of people experienced right off the bat is all of a sudden you're hit in the face and your hands go up, like you get into this mode of resistance. And I think a lot of people had that. And I know I had that until I realized, oh, that's exactly where I'm supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But
That's
obviously
the point, Sergeant.
that happens later. But yeah, the opening is great. I think Rey and Luke, I think Luke's introduction is fantastic. It makes sense. A lot of people forget that all the stuff that they think is from this movie was set up in The Force Awakens, and to backtrack on that. I mean, look, if I were to go and say exactly what I wanted to happen when I walked in, it would have been a freaking Rocky marathon cutting back and forth between a Rocky montage cutting back and forth between Luke training Rey and Snoke training Kylo for their big, huge battle. And it was going to be, and that was what I thought I wanted. And realizing how much better a good film was than a good, bright lights on a screen to eat popcorn to. That was something that was really prevalent in the film right off the bat. Is you start by questioning everything. And I think a film's job is to ask questions and to make you figure out what your answer is. And I think this movie does that fantastically.
Yeah, I agree. I love it. And how about you, Pep? What jumps out at you in the opening?
The entire opening jumps out at me, but I will touch on a few things. But the opening itself sets up the film and what's going to happen beautifully. Like, I didn't expect Luke to be that way, but I appreciated the way he started, because now, for the rest of the movie, I'm expecting an arc of some kind, just from, having some sensibility in how stories play out. And so I knew from the beginning, I was like, okay, Luke's at the rock bottom. So we're going to get, his rise in some way, shape, or form. And then, the bombing fleet, losing the bombing fleet, the resistance, just set up everything with Poe. There's going to be some internal conflict. There's going to be questioning of orders. There's going to be some subordination happening. And so, like, I gotta ask, like, people who kind of hate on this film is like, what were you watching? But we'll get into it with our deep dive. A couple of things I wanted to just talk about. One of the bigger criticisms of Rey is her fight with Kylo. And I just wanted to point out, this film, and maybe all of the films do this, but this film in particular does a lot of the legwork for you. Okay. Star Wars is famous for nuance. And even Filoni says, we don't tell you everything because part of the best thing about Star Wars is letting the fans speculate. Well, this film literally answers all of your questions. When someone asks, how did Rey beat Kylo? Snoke is literally right there saying, the deed split your spirit. You were bested by a girl who never held a lightsaber. You failed. And so it's like, yeah, there it is. There's your answer. He was split. He was torn from killing Han, and he was also physically injured. But, you know,
they spent the entire movie telling you how powerful it was.
Yeah. And, you know, all of these setups and payoffs people aren't paying attention to. And the final thing I want to talk about, or just the final thing that jumps out at me is Daisy Ridley's acting on the island is just so like brilliant. You know, subtle nuances in her twitching and her facial movements. When she's watching Luke drink from the thalassian, and the thalassian like looks at her, and she just like looks away, like kind of like, I can't face you right now because he just like, you know, he just milked you. I was like, wow, just those subtle kind of acting bits that she throws in there. I was just super impressed by it. And I also want to decipher what the Unity tree was whispering to her to this day. I don't think it's been deciphered.
That's a good point. I like it. And how about you, Brooke?
Yeah, I feel like you guys hit a lot of the points that I had also put down. But I really want to mention just how much I love the cinematography. I feel like that's the least controversial part of this movie, is that even people that hate it say, oh, it's still a beautiful film. I love how much that you still get like the exciting action and the fight scenes of Star Wars, but then especially in like the whole like fight scene, and through even when like Kylo is attacking the First Order and he has that moment with Leia, like you still have these really beautiful like intimate moments with like close-ups of the characters, and it's just so beautiful, and the actors did just like a phenomenal job with that. Even the actress that played Paige, we saw her for maybe 4 minutes out of the entire movie, maybe less than that. And I like still think about that whole scene because of how beautiful it was. So I really liked that those like intimate scenes were sprinkled in among the rest of like the action, which I feel like is different than we see in a lot of the other Star Wars movies. I also didn't really mind the humor. When people bring that up as like a point, I'm like, yeah, but Star Wars is always campy. Like I rewatched Revenge of the Sith, and the first like 20 minutes is just so ridiculous.
They're bonking while they're fighting on Mustafar. They're accidentally bonking little droids, and the droids go whoop. Like this is ingrained in the world.
It doesn't, yeah. So it really didn't bother me. I really liked it. I thought it was like it didn't take me out of the tone of the movie too much. It was like a nice like break from how serious the rest of the movie was. And I want to talk about the whole scene with Kylo and Snoke in the beginning, because that I feel like really shows you their relationship that we didn't really see that much of in the first movie. And I think like it's fleshed out a little more in like the comics and stuff. But you really get to see their like power dynamic between each other. When Kylo says, I've given everything I have to you, it like splits me in half because it's so emotional, because he's like, I've left my family. I've left everything I've ever known to give you literally everything. I killed my own father for your approval. And he is telling him like, well, you still suck. So, so I thought that sets Kylo's arc up really beautifully as well. And yeah, like Element said, it literally addresses the criticism that people have of things that happened in The Force Awakens. Like legitimate, like you're bested by a girl who never held a lightsaber and stuff like that. So as much as people say that there's like, oh, there's too much nuance in The Last Jedi, there's really not at all.
And the
if you just use,
the nuance.
Listen.
Yeah.
I think, and going like back to Luke, I think like you probably lost a lot of the audience once he just threw the lightsaber, because that was the last thing that people wanted to see. I feel like after that, there were probably a lot of people who were just so pissed that they just stopped listening to the movie.
Your hair goes up. You're not listening. You're looking for things to make this wrong so that you don't have to deal with the fact of what you just saw.
Yeah, exactly. And I really like this goes with the criticism too, when Luke says, you think I'm going to walk out with a laser sword and face down the entire First Order? And that was I was like, what did they expect him to do? Like, sure, he is like the legend that blew up the Death Star and is like a Jedi master and stuff. But I just don't know what Rey was expecting and what like the audience was expecting to happen. Like, I just don't think that it would have been the answer for him just like come back and save the day. It would have been really boring. It would have been really boring if that happened. I do really like that about Rian Johnson, and I've read countless interviews and watched things about him talking about the movie, and he says like, I put myself in the character's shoes. So he doesn't write what he wants to see. He writes what he thinks is best for, the character in the story, which I really appreciate. And then the last thing I'll say about this whole first section is that I love porgs. I don't know if you guys,
they look delicious.
You guys are like if you guys are pro porg or anti porg,
Brandon.
but I love them.
No, I do like the porgs myself, and how they just set up shop and they just became permanent members of the crew because they just couldn't get them all out. But no, I love what you guys are saying. I mean, like I said, a smart filmmaker, the film asks something of the audience. Like it could have been a Fast and Furious movie where you just watch a few hours of them just kicking ass. But this one, it asks things of the viewer, and I go back to Element 7 and I just had an interview with the author Daniel Jose, what's his last name?
Older.
Daniel Jose Older, who is a Star Wars writer. And one thing that he kept saying that I kept falling back to is that good storytellers tell the truth, and that's what this story was. It's the truth. All of Star Wars has shown us all of this time that no person or organization or anything is perfect or flawless, but that doesn't mean that it's not good. And there are certain things that exist that are just bad. So I really think that this movie succeeded in telling us the truth. Luke's not perfect. He can't be perfect. And what he did as a filmmaker is he took each of our main characters, right? He took Rey, Finn, Poe, Kylo Ren, and he even took Luke and said, as a good storyteller, he is like, what do they want? Okay, what is the biggest obstacle that we can put in their way towards getting that? And that's what drama in a story is. So that's what I loved about this whole first act, is that we got to see that. We got to see Rey trying to figure out, her place. I'm the person that is going to bring him back, and he's going to save everyone, and he doesn't. Trying to find her place in it and is not finding it. Poe's like, well, I'm the hero, and I'm just awesome, and he failed. His heroics are the last thing that they need at this moment. Finn is hasn't joined the cause. All I care about is just protecting, my friends, and he can't protect him. He can't save Rey in this situation. Every single person, whatever they're trying to do, it's not that. Kylo Ren is trying to be the next Vader, and he's trying to impress Snoke. And Snoke's like, you have too much of your father's heart. Like, done. You're just a child in a mask. Like, he just puts that on, and I love Andy Serkis's performance, and it's so good and menacing. And then when he speaks about Hux as a wild cur, but he's talking about Kylo Ren too, and Kylo Ren knows this at the same time, and he's being manipulated. I don't know, it just does so much in such a short period of time, that, yeah, I was just like, I was stunned when I saw it, and then immediately, okay, well, now we have to resolve all of these things. This is
what's really beautiful about this film is Rian Johnson is a craftsman. He is a writer through and through. He knows film like no one else. And it's difficult because when you look at the audience like reception, you get a really mixed reviews. But when you look at writers, the film is revered in the circle of respected writers because it's a well-written script. Just because you don't like something doesn't mean it's not well written. And there's a lot of things that I think are well written that I don't like, and things that I think are poorly written that I love. And what this film does beautifully is, in a good film, your character has to start off thinking the wrong thing, and they have to find out the right thing. And for the most part, there's usually a merging of those two things to give you, there's your thesis, your antithesis, and you come to a synthesis. And that's what this movie does brilliantly, is it goes, you have one person telling you, that this is the right way to do something, and another person telling you that this is the right way to do something. You need to take what you've learned here and find your way of doing something. Luke is not wrong. Rey is not wrong. Kylo is not wrong. Everyone is right about one aspect or another. They all have a valid point that needs to be thought about when you're thinking of making a decision as a character. Rey learns just as much from Kylo as she does from Luke. Finn learns just as much from Rose as he does from DJ. Poe learns just as much from Leia and his old thoughts of what the rebellion should be as he does from Holdo. And Holdo learns just as much from Poe as he does from her.
Which is why I get mad when people say, "Oh, it should have been Akbar." But we will get to that. We will get to that. But real quick, Element, you want to finish it because you turned green in the middle.
Yeah. So I think I was saying, it's important to point out and latch onto the scene where Luke says, "What did you think was going to happen? That I was going to face down the First Order with a laser sword." And it's important to latch onto that because he's preparing the audience for that not to happen. He's literally echoing what the galaxy expects of him. It's not important whether or not he can or cannot do that. It's important that people know that this is what Luke sees that the galaxy expects of him. And so when people admittedly, or when people critique the Last Jedi with "this is not my Luke Skywalker" and say Luke couldn't have done that and this isn't within his character, you were prepared for it. He prepared you for it. And the same just like I said earlier with the film answering all of your questions for you. The number one complaint about Luke, but he saw good in Vader. Guess who else said that? Rey. Rey had the same argument.
Mm-hmm.
Said, but you saw there was good inside him. And he answers that question then and there. And you can't be, I say this with a light heart, you can't be selfish and say that's not good enough. That is Luke's explanation. He failed his family and friends and failed the students he was training. And that's a large burden of failure to bear. And we can move on. I think that was my thought.
Also, one of the brilliant things about that line is everyone, it's obviously a critique of, Rian Johnson came to this film knowing this is what's expected of Luke Skywalker, is to go and face down the entire First Order with a lightsaber. But at the same time, what appearance does Luke take at the end? He walks out with a laser sword and faces the First Order. That wording is not used lightly, because he literally does it. Again, and it's Luke thinks that's the wrong thing. Rey thinks that's the right thing. What do they find? What does Luke find? A new way to do that. He finds a different way to do that. A different way to be Luke Skywalker and walk out with a laser sword and face the entire First Order. And I think that's just complex and brilliant writing, and it's nuanced. And I don't think we should shy away from nuance, because what was everyone's complaint in The Last Jedi, and what's everyone's complaint with most superhero movies, is don't treat us like idiots. We can handle smart filmmaking. Rian Johnson says, okay, challenge accepted. And everyone goes, wait, I have to work for this. You know, I think for me, that's something that's amazing about this film. And what was something that put me off of it for a while, because once I started seeing everyone hating it, it was much easier for me to just go along with that and to kind of ignore it and ignore the things that I really, truly loved about the film, because I had no one to talk about that with, because everyone hated it. There was such a wild response. And then I realized, like, no, I'm a filmmaker. I'm a storyteller. This is a story. This is incredibly nuanced and incredibly intellectual storytelling, and it needs to be appreciated.
Yeah.
So you don't have to like it, but you do have to appreciate the craft, because it's there.
Absolutely.
I do have a message for Star Wars Theory. In whatever universe that allows you to see this, we're all here. So don't go on your videos or whatever and talk about, I can't find anyone who likes The Last Jedi. We are all here, especially Darth Chaco and I, because we're present on YouTube. Our videos are out there. My review of The Last Jedi was there the day after I saw it in theaters. Sorry, just a big, small bone to pick, and a booger to pick, and all that good stuff.
No, that's all good.
Really glad I'm not tech savvy enough to figure out the YouTube world. It sounds like a whole piece of drama I don't need to be involved in.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's jump into the second act, because that was adding on to the first act, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So second act, and we're coming to you, Pep, first. But yeah, one or two. I mean, we have these great Force Skype calls. We have, Canto Bite. We have a bunch of stuff. What jumps out at you?
Definitely the Force connection and Canto Bite, and specifically Canto Bite, because I had the largest problem with this sequence. But after my 34th rewatch, I came to terms with it. And that's not to say you need to watch this 34 times to kind of appreciate the Canobite scene, but I had specifically went in on like the 34th time, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try. And yeah, like coincidentally, after speaking to Daniel Jose Older, with that in mind, like looking for the truth in that sequence. And so with the Force connection, the establishment of the dyad was so interesting to me, because like it made us think about truly what was behind their connection beyond just her being the girl and him being Kylo Ren. There was something amiss there, and this subtle touches within their connections, whether he couldn't see her surroundings, she couldn't see his, or the water droplets on his glove, like bringing them closer and closer together in terms of physical and tactile connection was huge. And I mean, it all leads to that lightsaber tug of war where, as Mateus was saying about starting with kind of like starting in one position and ending in another, that was like a mini journey in and of itself with the dyad connection, where they were so far apart, then they were getting so close together with their connections, then they had finally met up with each other, and it ended with them being pulled back apart again, symbolically with the lightsaber as well. And the truth with the Cantobite scene is something that we needed to see. Just the overall lens of looking at the far corners of the galaxy, how people live their lives, how the galaxy was lived in, and how people thrived in a world where we are so, as I'm going to steal Mateus's word, draped in tragedy. Because like we often don't visit this subject at all in Star Wars, and I think it's an important subject to visit when everything looks so beautiful, everything is so luxurious, and you're asking yourself, how could this possibly be when there's war happening? But then we get the context there that Rose is trying to point out, is that people profit off of this stuff, and there are corners of the galaxy where people profit and could care less about the suffering of people around them, or the people who suffer at their expense, or the people who profit at their expense. And it really recontextualized that sequence for me, because amidst that luxury, amidst that hullabaloo of the casino, we got, Tamiri and those kids with the fathiers and stuff. And that was like a stark contrast between the two, because that was what Rose was trying to point out. It's like, hey, these people are profiting, but these people are also the ones who are suffering because of it. They have to live this life of servitude, and they can't really see the best potential in themselves because these guys are profiting off of the misery of the galaxy. And I'll end it there.
Yeah, it's all the themes in it, and I love the appreciation for the Canto Bite sequence, because I think it does get more hate than it deserves, and also it, to me, honestly feels like it came directly out of George Lucas's head. Like it's like the most George Lucas thing I can think of. But how about your thoughts, Brooke?
Yeah, I really like their Force connection. I thought that was something that was almost teased a little bit in the originals, because we see Leia feeling like where Luke was in Empire, but we never saw them actually FaceTime. So I thought that was really cool. I thought it was surprising to have them, the protagonist and the assumed antagonist, to have so many moments together. I really liked, and after seeing The Rise of Skywalker and going back and thinking about all of it, it's more like Kylo is the other half of the protagonist. I think Adam Driver's even said that himself. But I just think it was a really cool aspect, that the cool direction that they took, especially knowing now that they are a dyad. I also just love how it was filmed. I love the way that they made the sound and everything. They were the only two people in the world that mattered. Their acting was awesome. I have a note that just says when Rey calls Kylo a monster, he looks at her and he says, "Yes, I am." But as soon as he says that, his face immediately drops and softens, as if he doesn't believe what he's saying himself, which goes into part of his arc in this story. And that was just something I noticed on one of my recent rewatches, because it was so subtle. I love that this movie ties so much into the other trilogies. I think this section especially has a lot of parallels and callbacks to Empire, which is, I think, why I also like both of these movies so much. I love that Luke mentions Darth Sidious, which is really cool because it kind of ties it back to the prequels, because we really had no connection in The Force Awakens that was kind of tying any of that to it. So I just thought that was a cool little insert What else? All of the throne. Well, I guess we can talk about the throne room scene because that is probably like one of my favorite scenes in all of Star Wars. Not even like the fight scene itself, but just like everything leading up to it. I love that it has, and then even after the fight, the before and after the fight are great. The fight scene itself is awesome, but just like how much symbolism is in all of it. I love how after the fight, when he's like asking, take my hand and everything, it's reminiscent of Darth Vader and Luke, but not like it's not like a mirror of that. And that's what I really appreciate, that it's like not same thing, different font. But it is a nice parallel. There's so much to like think about. I was going to say one of the things that I noticed in one of my recent rewatches in the throne room scene, I never noticed that Kylo, I never thought that he went in thinking he was going to kill Snoke, but you can see on his face, when he gets the idea, when like his lightsaber comes back to him, it's like spinning around in front of him. I just thought that was a really cool detail. I was like, oh shit, like that's where he gets the idea. And there's so much meaning behind him killing his master. I know people get hung up on like, oh, but we don't know anything about Snoke. Like we didn't get any information about him and his backstory. It's like, it doesn't matter because we didn't have any backstory on Palpatine until we got to the prequels. So what's the difference? Because it's not about Snoke, it's about Kylo. And I always say it was so important to his story arc that he was to break free from Snoke's hold. And I don't think he even realized the hold that Snoke had over him until he saw Snoke, attacking or, torturing someone he really cared about with Rey. And so you can see the progression of him getting like frustrated. He can't even look at Rey when she's being like tortured by Snoke. And then he gets the idea to kill her. I don't think he would have killed him. I don't think he would have killed Rey to begin with. I don't know how that would have played out otherwise, but I don't know. I really like how it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I love that the throne room scene, especially because of something you mentioned earlier, with how Rian Johnson does this expert job of focusing on people's faces, and it jumps in and out of the micro and the macro, and it's no better than I've ever seen it than in the fight where you're in and you're seeing Kylo Ren's facial expressions change as he's fighting, and it zooms out to see the action, and then it gets wider and you see Rey over here fighting, and then it pans and zooms into her face and she's still acting while fighting. Like it's really cool.
Small little addendum I forgot to mention. Every time I see Yoda in this film, I cry. And it's just so powerful. His lesson is a new lesson, but we also get a harken back to Empire when he says, still looking to the horizon. And we get brought back to that quote from Empire. Just brilliant.
Yeah, this movie is really, honestly, a masterclass in writing. I also think it's a masterclass in cinematic language, and it really rears its head in this portion of the film. What Rian Johnson was able to do with the dyad connection is brilliant because there's no crazy bells and whistles to it. He took something that he knew from studying film for a long time, we as an audience would naturally put together, is when two characters are across from each other, they're filmed from certain angles. And he did that to make us feel like they're in the same space. There's no special effects that puts them there. There's no visual representation of the Force. He does a brilliant job of putting them in the same scene without actually doing that visually, without doing that physically, but doing it visually. And it's absolutely brilliant. I think it's also a testament to how he works with actors, with the amount of import he put into making sure they were both on set for each other in those moments, even though they weren't going to be on screen. As an actor, for me, that's super important. Man, I want to work with Rian Johnson because he gets it.
I desperately need to see the pictures of Ray standing there in the rain, super cold in Scotland, and Adam Driver in a coat all bundled up, just out of the range of the camera, feeding her the lines. It just, I don't know, it just would be hilarious to see.
No,
but yeah, I can continue with your thoughts on this second act.
No, it's absolutely brilliant the way they do that. It also, I mean, the big thing in this act is we challenge our main characters. We have what they want and what they really need. Rey thinks what she needs is to find out about her parents. What she actually needs is to create her own future. Luke has that same sort of thing with being a legend or not being a legend, or coming back or not coming back. Poe thinks that he needs to go be a hero. What he really needs to be is a leader. Finn thinks what he needs to do is save Rey, but Rey doesn't need him. The rebellion needs him. So there's this really wonderful push and pull of every character, and they each have these two sides. So you have Rey not getting what she wants from Luke, or not getting what she wants from Luke, so getting what she wants from Kylo. And he takes this almost not quite mentorship, but this sort of comfort guide into this greater world. She thinks she needs someone to show her place in all this. She needs to make her own place in all this. And that's what she has to learn by the end of the movie. And it's the second act of a movie. At the end of the second act, your character has to be at their worst place. They need to find out the last thing they ever wanted to hear. Empire Strikes, the middle film of a trilogy is the second act of that long, long movie. In Empire Strikes Back, people look back and they think it's so incredible. It's always been this incredible thing. But fans were just as mad to hear that Luke Skywalker was Darth Vader's son. My dad always talks about how they thought he was lying. They were so angry. People were so mad because that's the last thing Luke wanted to hear, was that his father wasn't a hero. His father was the villain. What is the worst thing that Rey can find out in this movie? It's that she's no one. It's that she doesn't have the background to give her a Luke Skywalker story. And what's brilliant about this is she makes her own Luke Skywalker story, and that's so amazing. And Finn, he gets a push and pull from Rose and DJ, of DJ being this nihilist, everything's screwed up anyway, so there's no need to try. And Rose being the absolute epitome of do what's right. And Canto Bight, for me, I know a lot of people don't like it. I know people talk about pacing. I can't get enough. It hits a personal string with me. I am deeply, I'm a big animal activist, and they touch on a lot of stuff in that portion of the film when it comes to the commodification of animals and people for this greater thing where, you think this whole thing is beautiful. It wasn't made by the people who are getting the stuff from it. It's made by people who are still put down by this system they created. You know, they're getting everything they want from these little kids who return, and these animals who get nothing in return. And it's this really beautiful visual representation of that. She goes, the worst people in the galaxy, and two glasses clink together, and it's a beautiful like yacht, you know? And I just thought that was a really, you know, it was a risky choice to make. It was a statement. With Canto by Ryan Johnson makes a statement. And it's probably really off-putting to a lot of people, along
Keep
with most
politics
of
out of Star Wars.
Yeah. Keep politics out of the literal movie about Viet Congs against an imperial colonial force. Yeah. Keep it out of.
But yeah, I mean, but we'll definitely. So for me, your mic has actually just started going in and out a little bit. But,
no!
But we'll also jump into each individual person's journey along the way. Towards the end.
But the Canto Bite angle needed to be done because no Star Wars movie had ever touched on the subject. Hey, what is Signer Systems, Incom, and Corellian like? What are all the shipyards' role in all of this? Right? They're just doing just fine and living their lives, building ships to fight each other. And
yeah, I wish I got in on Signer Systems. You know, if I invested back in the Republic days, shoot.
Yeah. Oh, and what you said with
we're supposed to learn from this,
and what you said about Rey, she's supposed to be no one, and I think that really hammers home the importance and the impact of Rey Skywalker. She still is no one.
Yes.
And when people say I would have rather been she was Rey Nobody, she still is. It's just a name and a legacy she's carrying forward. She still is nobody.
Skywalker was the name for nobodies.
Mm-hmm.
It started with a slave with a slave who had a son. It's the name for nobodies.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so beautiful when it comes back to Rey.
I'm sorry, Chuck. I'm pushing this into the deep dive.
No. It's all good.
We knew we weren't going to be able to maintain composure when talking about The Last Jedi.
Oh man. Okay. And for me, yeah, there's a lot about, I mean, like you said, this second act did exactly what it was supposed to do for all of these characters. First act introduced the largest obstacle that they were going to have to overcome. The next act introduced for each individual character, you know, basically two schools of thought, and neither one of them are going to be perfect, right? But watching them and watching, especially, you know, I always say that each trilogy is like the Shakespeare quote of some people are born great, which was Anakin. Some people do great things, which was Luke. Some people have greatness thrust upon them, and that's Rey. And this whole time, she's looking for someone. She's holding Anakin's lightsaber, like this is the torch of the Jedi. And she's trying to pass the baton. Like, will you do it? Will you do the thing? And she tries to give it to Luke. He doesn't take it. She tries to give it to Kylo Ren. He doesn't take it. Right? She has to accept that role herself because what she's looking for is ahead of her, not behind her. And like the way, I don't know, it was just weaved in there so well. And particularly, you know, Poe's journey stands out to me because Poe learns that, hey, not everyone knows that you're the main character. Mm-hmm. Right? And you can't just throw your life away meaninglessly. Yeah, you can die and go out in a blaze of glory. It doesn't help anybody. You need to help people. Our goal is to keep this spark of a hope alive. And if there's no one around to do that, it dies and the galaxy dies with us. That doesn't mean that there's not ever a time that you will have to put yourself on the line. And that's exactly what Holdo does.
And that's where there's such a great nuance in this film, where Rian Johnson is aware that the world is gray, that sometimes you're going to learn a lesson and realize that, oh, well, in this specific moment, I shouldn't follow that lesson. And in this one, I should. And in this certain scenario, Finn should not sacrifice himself. In this certain scenario, Holdo should. That's nuance. That's life. That's the way it is. And I like that we got away from this black and white storytelling.
Well, I mean, that was
the way.
That was the DNA of what George Lucas laid down, though. You have Obi-Wan saying, "Yeah, you need to kill this guy because he killed your dad," and then you have Yoda like, "Yeah, really, straight up, I'm going to teach you to kill this guy. Please go kill this guy."
Mm-hmm.
And both of them were right, and they both fully believe that. Like, this is the guy that ruined the Jedi. He's been the downfall of the galaxy. I mean, obviously Palpatine was, but you know what I'm saying. And then Luke realized that killing him may not have been the best thing, and it was that same blood running through it. That same, this is how we win, by saving what we love, not killing what we hate.
One of my favorite lines in Star Wars. I think it's so relevant. It's so smart. I love Rose.
It should be every Anakin Stan's favorite quote.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, jumping ahead, we got the third act, right, which is just all the crate stuff. Also, real quick, I gotta touch on Holdo's sacrifice was beautiful, and the way that it was presented was incredible. The visuals, the sound design. I think this movie has the best sound design of any Star Wars film. My personal opinion.
I think we agree.
Well, I mean, I know you agree, Diane, but it was just such a beautiful scene. And no, it doesn't break canon. She was not in hyperspace. She was accelerating to enter hyperspace when she collided. Yeah. Please stop it. Like, you're embarrassing yourself.
Also, shout out to J. Kevin Parker for because I didn't notice this for the longest time. But her, when she's flying back into the ship using the Force, she splits the supremacy in the holo projector, which kind of like foreshadows the split.
I think we criminally missed Luke and Yoda's scene in this conversation.
We're gonna go there though, because we're gonna talk all about Luke.
Character.
Also, for people that didn't notice it, when Leia does fly back to the ship or force pull herself into the ship, she goes into an airlock. For some reason, people seem to miss that, but
a lot of things missed.
All right, so Act 3
in everyone's not in everyone's wheelhouse when we saw that movie.
Act 3. So we make it to Crate, and a lot of the people have experienced what they needed to learn their lesson. But this is the first time that we get to see it in action.
Yeah.
Brooke, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do want to mention, because I forgot about this, from like the second, can't remember if this is part of the second act. I think it is. I love the parallels between Vader and Leia that they make throughout the film. And those are things I didn't notice until, shout out to It's Victoria, y'all, who brought it up. And like, it lives in my head rent free every time I watch it now. I'm like, this is so cool. Because I feel like we expect there to be more parallels between Kylo and Vader because of how it's set up. And then it's just totally not. And I just think that's really cool. But anyway, going into the third act, I just want to shout out to Rose, because I really, really love her character. I hated the hate that she got. I think that maybe if she had a different hairstyle, people would hate her less.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Like, I think it's a bullet point on there. Like, I know what the other things are. But I love her so much because she is like the heart of what Star Wars is all about. She has like absolutely every reason to walk away after, watching her sister die. She doesn't really have any personal ties to anyone in the rebellion other than her sister. She is a mechanic and engineer who clearly doesn't talk to many of the actual rebels. Yet she still believes in the cause like wholeheartedly. And I love that line of what's not about
talking, doing the talking.
Doing
Do this.
talking.
It's it's not about fighting what you hate, it's about saving what you love. And that's like such a beautiful theme that should be, throughout all of Star Wars. The whole part with Luke at the end just like blew my mind. Going back now, I love all of the clues that they gave us. But when I was watching it, it wasn't what I expected. So I don't think it was what really anyone expected. So I just thought it was so cool. Like, people were mad about it, but I was like mind blown. I also love the little detail that Kylo doesn't even notice that Luke is holding the blue lightsaber that they just destroyed because he's so like blinded by his anger. I love that detail. And I don't know, I think it's really cool. I also want to touch on when Rey and Kylo have their last like FaceTime or whatever, when she's getting on the Falcon, she turns her back on him. She closes the door, which I think is really significant. I feel like a lot of criticism of like Reylo, I guess if you want to talk about that as like a ship, is that she is like, oh, he's a bad boy that I want to try to fix, but she never tries to fix him. And she makes it very clear that if he's going to be this way, that she's not going to stick around. So I really like that they did that. I also, one of the funniest comments I've gotten on one of my videos is someone said like Rey is too strong in the Force in The Last Jedi. And I was like, she moves some rocks.
The Force is
we don't see her. Yeah. Like, we didn't see that much else in this movie. And then shout out to Chewie for flying the Falcon with a Porg. And I think it's cool. I feel like it's one of the first times we see him fly the Falcon alone, which is kind of significant because he's always with Han.
Yeah, but how does he know? How does he know how to fly?
That's a good question. We've never seen him fly before. Man,
how did he fly the Falcon alone? It requires two people. Like two people.
Maybe it was
fly at the same time.
Maybe it was the Porg because the Porg, flies. Oh. His flight experience. He taught to Chewie. Yeah,
the chosen Porg.
The personal flight experience as a Porg.
Look, the fandom menace would believe a Porg flying over Rey flying. So.
You know what? Don't put that in their heads.
But how about you, Mateus? We have the final act.
Yeah, I think the final act is brilliant because of the idea of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Again, I think one of the coolest parts is the fact that, again, Luke walks out with a laser sword and faces the First Order. Not in the way we thought. A lot of people took his force projection as some sort of cowardice cop-out. I think that's dumb. I think that's wrong. I think people forget what about Luke we really like. Luke is us. Luke has always been us. He's never been perfect. One of the cool things was looking at Luke and seeing him do something that I do when I'm depressed. In the beginning, he leans into this disgustingness of himself. When he's drinking the milk, he's like, look at me, look at how awful I am. You know what I mean? And that's really relevant with a lot of people. There's an imposter syndrome that comes with something like becoming a legend. And there's a self-loathing. And And in the end, there's this acceptance of this legend and realizing that there's a way to do this peacefully. And what is Luke's greatest moment? What does Luke win the day with? It's not his lightsaber. It's the exact opposite. He throws his lightsaber away. That's the big moment in the end of the original trilogy, is that he chooses to save what he loves and not fight what he hates. Mm-hmm. That's what Star Wars is about. That's what Luke's arc is about. What I find super relevant, and Rian Johnson has talked about that scene specifically being his favorite moment in Star Wars, he makes it impossible for himself to hurt Kylo Ren again. He comes to Kylo Ren and tells him, no, I'm giving you a second chance. I did not come to kill you. You know, I can't kill you in this state. There's no way I could even fuck up. Like, excuse me, I don't know where your language barriers lie on this show.
Below that.
Just a bleep. It'll be great. He comes to Kylo Ren and shows him that even if this mistake that I made in the past, I'm not going to try and kill you now. He came in a peaceful way, in an intelligent way, in a smart way, just logistically thinking of creating what people needed to see without actually having to hurt this boy that he's already hurt enough. And I thought that was really a brilliant way to end Luke's journey. I also love the idea that the saga starts off with Leia coming to Luke in a projection, and it finishes off with Luke coming to Leia as a projection. I think that's so poetic.
Yeah.
I think people forget about the second half of this movie. I think they remember that Luke realizes he was wrong. Luke ends up doing exactly what he said he wouldn't. He realizes that, look, the Jedi Order might be a mess. And I think that moving forward, I think that Rey is going to take that information and learn from that and create the Jedi Order in a way that it should be, you know, in attempting to make something more perfect, you know, which obviously isn't possible, but in an attempt to make it better. And he learns that the world needs a Jedi right now. The world needs me to be this figure. And that's something really great. Again, literally the movie agrees with the audience. Rian Johnson's not saying the Jedi, that this idea is bad. He's not saying it's good either. He's saying that at certain times we need it, at certain times we don't. At certain times, we don't need Poe to be Luke Skywalker and be, you know, the hero and be a character in a movie. But sometimes the world needs Luke Skywalker. And I thought, again, it's nuanced. It's gray. This movie is so gray. And I love that about it. In the way that it really says, maybe there are no right and wrong answers when we come to things as a whole. Maybe certain things are right at certain times and wrong at others. And I think it's an emotionally intelligent film. And that really hits home with me of kind of opening it up to that kind of conversation, which I think Star Wars has the capability to be and has always had the capability to be. And it's stupid not to use that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think this whole like end scene just reminds me that a lot of people just didn't pay attention to the movie. Like they just forgot the second half of the movie. because I've had people say Luke didn't even apologize to Kylo. I'm like, okay, first of all, he did. He said, I failed you then, and I'm sorry. He said, I wasn't here to
And he cried while doing it.
I'm sorry. He says, I'm not here to save your soul, because he wasn't there to do that. But he does, in fact, apologize. I've had one of the funniest interactions I've ever had on TikTok is I always ask when people are like, oh, well, Luke's character was terrible in The Last Jedi. I say, okay, then how would you write it better? And no one can give me a great answer of how it could be better. I've had one person though say, oh, well, you know what? He could have been in hiding, but then he trains Rey and he comes back and, helps out.
You mean what?
My guy, that is exactly what happened in the movie. It's just mind-boggling. And we'll talk more about the criticism and stuff, but like, it's just so funny to me sometimes.
And Pep?
I have to echo what Brooke said earlier about not expecting that scene on Crate with Luke. I certainly didn't expect it, and I tell everyone this every time we talk about that scene. The first time it was a hot take, Kylo Ren stabbed him and nothing happened. I was like, Luke is this powerful right now. And then, of course, I came to my senses and realized it was a projection. But it really is probably to me the most important scene of the movie. Because of what it symbolizes in Luke's journey. He starts off with Rey saying that the Jedi die, that if the Jedi die, the light dies, is vanity. But at the very end, when he comes back to save the Resistance, he's not necessarily saving the Jedi, but he's saving the idea of the Jedi and what it represents in the people's hopes and dreams and what the Resistance is about. And so he came to the conclusion that no, he's right. If the Jedi die, the light doesn't die. That, of course, concept is vanity. But what doesn't need to die is what they represent, and that's what Luke came back to represent,
or what they tried to represent. Like what the idea is.
Yeah, and building off of what Mateus said about his purpose of being there, aside from rekindling the hope and the spark of the Resistance, I think more than giving Kylo a second chance, he was giving himself a second chance. His first confrontation with Kylo was, as Rey said, your mistake was thinking that Kylo had already chosen when he hadn't, and so Luke was primarily there again to confront Ben the way he did it in the first time. The first time he confronted him with the thoughts of stopping him and preventing something bad from happening. But this time he came in the most Jedi way, non-violently, and he just wanted to talk to Kylo, all while giving the Resistance the time that they needed to escape. And when we talk about Luke facing down the First Order and being this kind of monolith figure in The Last Jedi, and people saying it's cop out, it's lame, I do have to ask them, which Luke were you a fan of? The Luke that was raging out and almost cut his father's hand off, or the Luke that threw away his lightsaber? Because if you were a fan of the raging Luke, you could understand where he's coming from in this movie. And if you were a fan of the one that threw away his lightsaber, you can understand why he is not facing down the First Order with his lightsaber. Like these two, the ego and the superego, they exist.
Yeah.
His darkness from, almost cutting down his father is the beginning of this movie. His throwing away this lightsaber and saying, I will not fight you, I'm a Jedi like my father, is the end of the movie. And if you're a fan of either, you got both. And I deeply question your comprehension if you're sitting there saying, this doesn't make less sense for Luke. So yeah, I'll end it there.
We're getting a nice segue into the critical response.
We are. I gotta say, I do echo with what you guys were saying about the end of the film, and like almost all of it was covered. I mean, all of it was covered extremely well. So I don't have a lot to add. I will say that Chewie flying the Falcon through the crystalline structure of a planet is the most epic piloting we've seen of the Millennium Falcon. And in my opinion, I think that's the greatest Millennium Falcon feat. The second one, again, just my opinion, Lando flying through the second Death Star. Like, imagine flying like hundreds of miles through this thing without knowing whether or not you're ever going to just run out of space, and then out of it being chased by an explosion.
Hey man, if you've been to Galaxy's Edge, that ship ain't easy to fly.
Is it 12 parsecs?
I guess. I mean, Kessel Run was cool, but they had some help.
I mean, it was like the flight through the Death Star 12 parsecs.
Probably close. That thing was big.
Wow.
Well, according to the critics, Nemo Outpost was the best feat of the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah. All right. So, just taking a look at the time. Yeah, let's just jump into the critical and public reception, and yeah, just dive into what we typically see. I know that we've already covered some of it, but yeah, I mean, we'll start with Mateus.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I've talked to people who are diehard Star Wars fans in my industry who are actors, and they've talked about all I ever wanted was to be in Star Wars, and I don't know if I could handle that with the way that the fans are anymore. And it's a rough thing. I mean, the way, just in logistical thinking, the way implicit bias is so clear in the way that people talk about Rey and Rose and Finn and mostly everything about this movie. Again, things that are new scare people. Things that challenge what is comforting to them scare people. It's a human response. I think the people that really like The Last Jedi took this as a challenge they took what Rian Johnson did as a challenge to be explored with you, which was what I felt. I never felt, I mean, later on, I really got swept up in the legendary hatred of this movie. I always knew, like, the scene between Luke and Yoda is probably the greatest scene in all of Star Wars in my mind. And I was like, I guess it's just in a bad movie. And then, I kind of went from loving the movie to being beaten down into hating the movie to finding a community of people who also liked it and being like, oh my God, yes, finally. Like I can accept my love for this movie, which is really sad. I think in the way that people, the way that audiences view things is this need for, if you don't like something, no one else can. And that's really difficult. It's also frustrating because, I mean, for most of the critiques I've heard, it's based on, again, you talk about, Chaka, you had a great point about opinions, can't be wrong, but if they're based off of wrong information and you're playing it as a fact, then we have a problem here. And that's what I've found about this is if someone says that, look, humor is subjective. This movie hits my funny bone perfectly. people I know, not a single joke lands. That's art, baby. That's how it is. Like, you're not going to make something that everybody loves, and trying to take away a love that somebody has because you don't have it is childish. And I think movies are beautiful, and some things mean a lot to people, you know, and for people to discredit this movie when there's a lot of people who have been really emotionally moved, and there's people who this movie is their comfort movie, and there's, you know, like, people think about their thoughts first, obviously, but I mean, they gave no thought to whether or not the people on the other side of the Twitter posts they post were going to be detrimentally affected by what they said. And that's dangerous. So it's disappointing. I think I'm starting to see, oh, hello, my dog just entered my room. You start to see,
like a velociraptor that learned to open doors.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened. Yeah, I'm starting to see this be, at least with people who like the sequels already, Last Jedi is kind of becoming like, oh, I think this is the best, like the best of the sequels. This is, a lot of people are realizing like, oh, this is a good movie. We were all being a little crazy, you know, and we're starting to see people come around to it, which is really promising. And the support that I've seen.
He was deceived by a lie. We all were. Yeah.
The support I'm seeing for Kelly Marie Tran and John Boyega and that from, I like to think, our side of the fandom has been really inspiring. And I think a lot of people are having to use their critical minds and flex that muscle to talk about their love of this film. And if anything, it makes us all work a little bit harder, you know, to work on that muscle. And I feel like a better storyteller, a better filmmaker for having gone on this journey with The Last Jedi. And it's been an integral part of how I understand people's reaction to film. And it's been really insightful. Yeah, it's a crazy monolithic moment in Star Wars history. Yeah. The same way I think the Phantom Menace release was. And yeah, I mean, I love the film. I wish more people could get what's so good about it. Because a lot of their complaints, again, I think they turned off their critical thinking minds when Luke threw away that lightsaber, or when Rose was a woman Asian. Yeah, I think a lot of people turned off their critical thinking brains and watched with anger instead of watching with curiosity and understanding. And if you watch this movie with curiosity and understanding and a love of art and a love of Star Wars, it's a beautiful experience. And all the things that you thought you hated become beautiful. And I want more people to like this movie because it's a great experience watching it. I haven't gotten tired of this movie. I've seen it so many times recently. I've just chosen to sit down and watch it because when you love this movie, you love this movie.
Yeah. And how about you, Element?
I'm gonna hit this with like a broad spectrum antibiotics, just so we can get more discussion on the other things.
I went way too long. Sorry about that.
99.8% of the reception, the critiques that at least I've heard from people who hate this movie are just nitpicks, and 99.99% of the critiques that are valid are critiques that I've had of it. So, you know, as everyone knows, and I'm pretty sure everyone does have their own critiques of these movies. You know, not every movie is perfect, but whenever we talk about The Last Jedi, we talk about like small nitpicks or small misunderstandings of when people turned off their thinking caps or took off their thinking caps, as you say. We covered a lot of this during our discussion, all of these questions that people had. Why is this happen? Why did that happen? And it's been answered in the movie. Just pay attention to the dialogue and you will get your answers. You know, just off of the top of my head, some of the things that we didn't cover was, you know, why didn't they destroy the fleet? You know, the dialogue is there. They're lighter, they're faster, they can stay out of our effective range. Okay, listen to that while you're watching the movie. You will no longer have that question. Luke tried to kill a little kid because of a bad dream. That literally didn't happen. Ben's like in his 20s. He's not having a bad dream. Luke is literally sensing what I presume to be the cataclysm of the Hosnian system. And, you know, we get clues that this is a dark side version. His Kylo's version of events is the dark side version when Luke says, I've only seen this raw power once before. I wasn't scared of it then. I am now. And then Kylo's version of events says he sensed my power and he was scared. So one of these things does not match the other, right? Luke was not scared of it. He was scared of what he would become. Lots of clues in the, you know, I really think that if everyone rewatched this movie from the lens of, as Mateus said, curiosity and appreciation for Star Wars, instead of being dismissive from the get-go, you can glean a lot more information. You can understand more where we're coming from, and you can erase a lot of these questions that you have that are clearly answered in the film. And that's all I'll say.
Yeah, that's great. And your thoughts, Brooke?
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of the criticism that I see, especially on being on TikTok, a lot of the times comes from people that have maybe only seen the movie once in the theater and went home and looked up reviews and stuff on the internet and found the same 4 YouTube videos, the same Reddit posts, all of that stuff. And just that was their deciding factor, that they hated it without giving another chance. So anytime I do like meet someone who says, you know, I really didn't like it, I always ask them, well, how many times have you seen it? Did you see it before or after you saw like internet reception? Because I feel like those are factors that play into it, because if you go into it knowing that, oh, it's going to be terrible, then you're going to look at it through that lens. And if you only see it once, there's so much that you miss. And part of what makes a great movie is the rewatchability about it. And so it always makes me laugh when people are like, oh, it's a good movie, but it's not a good Star Wars movie. Like, so you're saying Star Wars movies are bad? Like, I don't understand what you're saying here. I think people latched on to the things that Mark Hamill had said in the beginning and just took that in stride as their deciding factor. Like, oh, well, the actor that plays Luke Skywalker doesn't even like his character. And his opinion is totally valid. Like, we saw his tweet earlier this week, I think. Like, his opinion on his character is totally valid, but that's not to say that he doesn't understand how it happened, because he's come out and said that. And reading interviews with Rian Johnson, he's like, I worked with Mark. We argued a lot. We talked about it. Like, we worked through it. It wasn't like he was just like, all right, here's your script. This is what you have to do. Because I don't think that he's that kind of filmmaker. Yeah. And I want to bring another point up because I know like Rian Johnson like publicly like just doesn't care about the hate, but because I really like him and really appreciate him, I feel like I need to defend him. But when people say Rian Johnson doesn't care about Star Wars, he said he doesn't care about Star Wars. I've heard that so many times, and I finally like found someone who actually gave me like a source from where that came from, and it was some YouTube video. But I found the original interview that stems from, and it was an interview about Knives Out. It was not an interview about The Last Jedi at all. So it was a more recent interview. And the interviewer asks him, what is your process, like your writing process when you're writing something original like Knives Out versus writing something that's already in an established universe like Star Wars? And he says that it's basically this, he goes through the same process. And I have like exactly what he says. He says, I don't really think in terms of universes or in terms of creating worlds or whatever. That's not interesting to me. And I think people latched onto that to say that he doesn't care about the lore. What he's saying is that he's not a George Lucas. He's not a George R.R. Martin. He's not a world builder. That's not what he's interested in. He said, the only thing that's interesting to me is story. You're still telling a story that is new to the thing that you're doing, and it has to work within the context of that movie. Nowhere in that does he say, I don't care about Star Wars. It's very clear if you look at anything else that he's ever said that he cares a lot. So that's just really frustrating.
One of the most lore-packed Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
Like, what's really funny about that is that he may not think that that's what he's good at, but he's good at it.
Yeah, and it's just frustrating to hear those things. And I know that you hear something and you're just going to take it without looking into, fact checking or looking into the story. It just blew my mind when I found that interview, and I was like, this isn't even about The Last Jedi. He's talking about Knives Out. It's crazy. And then I just end up to touch on, like, as a woman who likes the sequels and who likes The Last Jedi particularly, has been very interesting, especially when you take that publicly to the internet. Because I've looked in, like, I hate the whole concept of, it's just feminist propaganda, because it's so frustrating when I hear that. And because it's not, I did a whole like research on representation of like the male versus female characters in Star Wars, and the men always have more lines than the women. They always have more screen time than the women. People are saying The Last Jedi has a feminist propaganda when women were only on screen for 40% of the movie. The other 60% were men. It's still unbalanced.
And on the other side of that, Rian Johnson writes really great female characters. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of that comes from him creating a general and saying, you can lead an army with feminine tact. And like those little things where, even though it's obviously we always have major work to do, Rian Johnson is the most, out of, I think, most of the directors who have directed Star Wars so far, movies. He has been the most in touch with feminine theory, with feminist theory. And there is that. But I also think they'll put it on Kathleen Kennedy, the money person. Like she has any control. She just hired men. How is she using a feminist agenda?
Yeah.
I'm just ready to believe if there's no Anakin on screen, it's a feminist agenda.
Uh-huh. We could go on about it forever. Like, and I
do a with Jay Stevens.
There are aspects of the women in the movie that deal directly with issues that women face. Like when Poe first finds out who Holdo is, he's like, that's the Admiral Holdo. Like, he says, that's not what I expected. And my first thought was he expected a man. Mm-hmm. Because that's what women in leadership face. That's what Kathleen Kennedy faces all the time. And
that's what he said. He's like, the battle of something, Holdo?
Yeah.
That's okay.
He was like, that Holdo? Yeah. And It's just wild to me. And I do agree. I think Rian Johnson, even like the sequels in general, write female characters really well. Like I hate when people, I hate all of the hate for Rey, because I really identify with her as a character. I know, shout out to Shaylo Wren, who always talks about how Rey has a lot more feminine qualities than masculine qualities, and that doesn't make it bad. Just because you can't relate to the character doesn't make her boring or bad. And I don't know what it's going to take for us to get over that hill, but I don't know. But that's all I really wanted to say.
Yeah, and so kind of
without talking about it,
where I kind of come down on it myself is, again, 99% of all the critique I hear really holds no water, and there's a fully explained answer for it inside of the film. Or it's something that they complain, and you're like, that is literally the point of this thing. I don't like Kylo Ren because he's not, like, he's no Vader. He's just a Vader wannabe, and you're like, that is the point. Yeah. Yes, you are you're correct, sir. Additionally, it had the misfortune of coming out around the time of the Me Too movement. That was a horrible process. I'm gonna go and cut that.
I was a feminist, we swear.
No, but it had the misfortune of coming out around the time of the Me Too movement, which led people to just make these automatic assumptions, right? And a lot of companies were trying to promote things. That's why Kathleen Kennedy had that shirt that said "The Force is female," and people still talk about it. But she didn't make it. That's a shirt from Nike that was given out at a film festival that she was speaking at. Come on. I've heard people say that that Holdo is like feminist agenda, and there's not a single thing I can think of that Holdo says or does that's gendered in any way. That if it was a guy saying it, it would be no different. I think
one of the big things with her is that she's a well-written character that is in a position of power that isn't I don't think she is a male character that they switch to female. You know what I mean? Like a lot of female characters feel like that. I think her existence is what challenges it, because she shows up to fight a war in a stunning dress and jewelry and doesn't take shit from the guys in the room. And that's what she should do. That's just her being who she is. And just that is the feminist agenda. The feminist agenda doesn't agree. It's the equal agenda. It's the idea,
But if she was a man, like none of that storyline would have happened.
And having I don't know, it's just interesting to me because having a hotshot pilot or a hotshot detective or a hotshot race car driver who their commander or leader disagrees because they're reckless is every movie in the 80s. Yeah. It is 80% of the movie in the 90s. It is so prevalent. It's just a regular trope. But then there are,
Top Gun.
That's lit. You're writing checks your body can't cash. Like, that's literally what she's saying to him. Don't be reckless, don't be stupid. And he learns from that. So it's
she should have told Poe the plan, and I was like, on what universe? She has no obligation. Mm-hmm. He's being insubordinate.
And has a record of insubordination and was demoted for insubordination, and the entire bombing fleet that was lost came from the Ninka.
Yeah.
Came from her ship. She knew all of them.
It's because the whole galaxy are big fans of Poe.
Yeah, because he's the lead.
She doesn't know Poe's the main character.
Nope.
Yeah.
And then, you know, another criticism that I'll hear is the choreography in the throne room scene. Now, there are definitely mistakes in that choreography. I agree with that 100%.
There's one glaring one that I've debunked several times.
Yeah, she doesn't kick 3 people.
Yeah.
3 people go for a high attack. She stops all of them. They're not going to just stay there. So she kicks 1, but the other 2 pull up, you know.
So she stops one of the high attacks, and that guy has a staff. She parries it to the side, and his staff pushes the guy to his right. Then she kicks the guy in the middle backwards. The guy in the far end of the composition isn't being kicked away. He just spins off. Attack.
Yeah. It's but in all fairness, I mean there are certain things that could have been tightened up. But the choreography in Star Wars fights has never been the best. I mean, a lot of people love the prequel fights, and you know, I especially love, you know, Obi-Wan versus Anakin and Revenge of the Sith and Duel of the Fates. But besides those 2, there are a lot of really glaring issues. You know, I just posted, you know, one today of Jango Fett just jumping on the ground instead of shooting Mace Windu in the face. But like when
even
Anakin,
in that Mustafar fight, there's issues with them kicking each other and not, like, you know, it's
not making contact. They switched lightsabers a couple times. Palpatine has Anakin's lightsaber for some strange reason when he's fighting Mace Windu. Like, there's a lot of like really odd stuff, but it doesn't matter. I don't know, because it was never the purpose of the fight.
Right,
but
the fight lies in the character, and all that is strong. You know, every move is motivated.
Yeah, so I don't know. It just was never. It was never a big deal to me. Yes, I mean there's a knife that appears to have gone missing. It obviously it could have been dropped at that moment in time, but yeah, even if it does go missing, that's still less weird than Palpatine having Anakin's hilt. Or when Anakin gets his arm cut off, he literally just stops fighting and goes like this. You know? Actually, the choreography of that fight is super weird. Where it's just their faces and they're just going like this. Like they're animated.
Yeah.
But that's a whole separate...
But critiquing that fight, or any fight in particular, is just missing the forest for the trees. You know, you're not paying attention to what's really happening.
The movie's not meant to be watched frame by frame.
Yes.
That's not the experience.
Yeah. That's why people are always surprised when I say that the lightsaber battles in the original trilogy are my favorite, because they're like, what? They're so boring. I'm like, yeah, but the emotional weight and the meaning behind it is like so much more important than what's actually happening. Mm-hmm. And it's, yeah, I think about that a lot.
And can we dispel the Mark Hamill stuff? If you press play on those interviews and just watch it all the way through and not pause it afterwards, he will say he was wrong about it, about his thoughts.
Disney paid him to say that. Disney paid him.
Well,
my favorite so I reason is people are like, oh, but he said he didn't like it more times than he said he liked it. And you're like, yeah, it's because after he saw the movie, like, you don't keep doing press for the movie afterwards.
Yeah. I do want to point.
Insane.
I do want to point this out, because people will use a certain clip of him saying something about it, and then I will point out, press play, resume that clip, because in the next sentence he says, "But I have to say, having seen the movie, I was wrong." And then they say Disney paid him to what? Like, when did they have time to inject themselves between the two sentences? In the same thought, he critiqued his character and said he loved it afterwards. They took a bow and arrow and shot the money at him mid-thought.
The interesting thing for me, and what I always think is why that argument is so stupid. The whole interview, the first interview of him talking about him, I fundamentally disagree with everything that you've done here, is in the documentary Disney made for their own movie. They used it as tension in that documentary, and it's brilliant, but they lean into that. They liked that aspect because if people are hearing like, oh, there was drama on set, now I got to see this.
The thing is, Mark Hamill doesn't even agree with himself, because in the same interview, he also says, but I like being pushed out of my comfort zone, and I like being challenged because it would have been boring if I was a benevolent Jedi teaching young Padawans, and that's the same interview. So he can't even agree. He can't even come to his own consensus.
Well, there's a difference between what you think is the best. And I think he dealt with this idea of this is the best, probably the best thing for my character, but I want to swing laser sword around.
Yeah.
I want to be a character that I imagined in my head for years, selfishly. And it's fine to think that as an actor. Absolutely. You want to be that character that you created in your head and loved. And nothing is ever going to reach that. But I think people are mistaking. He's genuinely said, like, I think it's the best Star Wars movie since Empire Strikes Back. He said that in an interview. He knows the movie is good. He liked being on Mandalorian and being hopeful Luke because, again, for the majority of the movie, he didn't get to play that character. Doesn't mean that's a bad thing. It means he didn't get to play that part of his character.
Yeah, and the biggest point is, Mateus, you're an actor. You know a lot more about that acting world than the rest of us, and probably writing and all this stuff. Pep, you have a lot of experience writing and ton of Star Wars and ton of lore. And me, I've read over 200 Star Wars books or whatnot. Now there's a lot of things I can't speak about with the woman's experience, but Brooke, you can speak to all of that. Which one of ours opinion is more valid than the others? None. It's all the same. Same as Mark Hamill. So it's cool even if he does hate it. Let's say he hates it. He thinks it's the absolute worst thing.
I don't think Mark Hamill would want you to hate it.
And he specifically said, I regret saying it because people will use this to unfairly prejudice themselves against it. He says, don't use this for that purpose.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's a whole side topic. But
we need to let these professionals have their opinions.
Absolutely. But also not force we don't have to force our opinions on others. I don't think that's what we're doing here. But, also give it a chance. Let people like what they like. Don't try to dominate them. And one of my absolute favorite things, and one of the reasons I started doing this podcast is I love when someone gives me their Star Wars rankings and it's wildly different from my own. I want to talk to that person because I got to know why. And it's not that I think I'm a better fan. Oh, your list is wrong because it's different than mine. No, that means you have a really different perspective than mine, and I'd love to hear it. That being said, we are
we're out of time.
No, we are going pretty long, but if we want to each just pick one character to kind of summarize their journey and our thoughts on them. The caveat being, you can't pick a character someone else has already picked.
All right.
I'll go first then. I'm just kidding.
I am. I'm going to start with Brooke.
Okay. Well, I will. Since I was on the Kylo Ren episode, I will talk about Rey instead this time because I feel like I identified with her the most in this movie. I really dislike when people say that she never fails because she fails so much in this movie. She fails to bring Luke back. She fails to bring Ben back to the light. She fails to get the answers that she wants or the answers that she wants to hear about her parents, and later fails to accept what's true. She even if it's not for a long time, she allows herself to like let the dark side in her first, lesson with Luke. And then she goes into the cave, which was calling to her. She fails a lot, and it's not necessarily like this grand, like Lord of the Rings journey where she, falls down a mountain. I don't know. It's a lot of it is emotional. It's psychological. It's intrinsic, and that doesn't make it bad. That's what I love so much about it, because that's a lot of what failure often means, especially for like a woman. Like I talked about this before, not to like stereotype too much, but I feel like failure and success are often viewed differently between a man and a woman, or what's more feminine, what's more masculine. Because we see, if you want to compare it to Anakin, he is very emotional, but he views his success as being the best Jedi, or say like protecting the people he loves. That's very like a much more of a masculine trait. And Rey is more worried about, self-identity. Do I even know who I am? What is my place in all of this? And that's where she views success and failure. And I feel like as an audience, we project what our own views of success and failure are onto those characters, instead of thinking about what that character, like putting ourselves in their shoes and what they're actually struggling with. So that is something about Rey's character, particularly in this movie too, that I just wanted to talk about. We see her, not to talk too much more about the fight with the guards. Like, sure, she wins against some of them, if you want to call that a success or non-failure, but like we see her spend the entire fight fighting off like 2 of them, and then you look over and Kylo's fighting the other 6. And it's like, yeah, sure. Like she also clearly does not know how to use a lightsaber very well. She's still like swinging it and like missing and not doing much with it. But I like that her relationship with Ben is not what we expected in this movie at all. It's certainly not what I expected. It's like going back to what I said about having the protagonist and antagonist spend so much time together. Because usually it's like the good guys on one side, the bad guys on one side, and they all come together for a fight in the end. But it wasn't like that. And I really appreciated that it humanized both of them. I don't want to talk too much about Kylo, but like even Rey sees, she's able to see why Kylo Ren is the way that he is and how it happened. And they have more in common with each other than they do differences, because they find that like shared issue with their identity. On one side, Kylo is struggling with not being able to live up to his family's legacy, and Rey is just trying to find what that is. She spends the whole movie trying to, get Luke to come back and save the world. And then she tries to get Ben to come back and save the world. And I don't even know if she fully accepts at the end that it's like, oh, it's me that has to do this. I think by the end of Rise of Skywalker, we see that happen, but she struggles a lot with being the hero and not putting it off on someone else and looking for that in other people. So I think that's really cool.
I mean, even in Rise of Skywalker, they were complaining like, all you do is sit here and train. We need you.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've always appreciated how she is the exact opposite person of Luke, where Luke never wanted to train. He wanted to be out there on the missions, just kicking butt.
Mm-hmm.
And, in that film, I know we're not talking about it, but Rey's like, I promise, after training fully for a year, like Luke lasted a few weeks before just dipping out and getting frustrated. She trains with Leia for a year, and still at the end of training, hands the lightsaber back to Leia and says, "I will earn your brother's saber, I promise." It's such the opposite character, and I think a lot of people still try to put her into the same mold as Luke, and it doesn't fit, and that means it's bad.
No.
But that's the point. That's the whole point.
And if you're going to compare it to Luke and Empire, like their motives for leaving their training is very different, because Luke is leaving to go save his friends and confront Vader and try to like be the hero. Rey is realizing that she's not finding what she needs with Luke on the island, so she puts her faith in Ben, and she's leaving for that reason. They're very different motives. So I hate that people try to put them in the same box.
Yeah, it's brilliant, the idea of, again, and it's a great commentary on kind of what society has beaten into women, is this idea that it's your job to find the man who will save the day. And that's a really smart, and her whole arc is, oh, my parents must be the important part about me. Oh, Kylo is the one who can save the day if he comes to the light. If he can't, then Luke has to do it. And if Luke can't, then Kylo has to do it. She never thinks of herself as being the person who can have the legend. And her arc is incredible. She's such a beautifully crafted and well-written character. And it's so frustrating to hear the opposite, because it's just not true.
Go ahead. I was gonna say, even in the when she's with Snoke and Kylo in the throne room, when Snoke was like pulling her towards him, she says, "You underestimate Luke Skywalker and Ben Solo, and me." I think it's important that order, the way that order was put, is significant. She doesn't think of herself first as the hero.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, even the way that Kylo Ren says to her, like, you don't have a place in this story. Like, I'm the one who has the place, but like, you're nothing, but not to me. So you should be by my side. And it doesn't end up well, but, how about you, Mateus? So Rey's off the table. Who are you going with?
I'm going to make you all hate me, and I'm going to pick Luke.
Okay.
Because again, I latch on to the character for the same reason that I think most people do, which is the hopefulness. And I think a lot of people misjudge that. They think that this movie takes that away, and for me, I think it does the exact opposite and doubles down on it. Because hope in the absence of turmoil is nothing. It means nothing. If you have hope in your life and everything has always gone great for you and you've never failed, what is hope? It's just expecting what usually happens. For hope to mean something, you have to have lost it at some point. And I think that, again, Luke was never a perfect character. I liked Luke because Luke was impulsive, like me as a kid. Luke was overly caring about his friends and would put himself in danger for them and not think intellectually about it, and think with his heart, like me, when I was a kid. I think in a lot of people, I imagine just that taps into their human nature as well, and why Luke is so loved by people is he feels like you. He feels like he's working towards the best version of himself, and that inspires you to do so. And I think to have Luke in this movie be not in the role of learning something is a disservice to what his character is there for. We are supposed to learn through Luke. And if he doesn't learn, if he only teaches Rey, if he doesn't fail, you have to fail to learn. Yoda says it, the greatest teacher failure is. Luke is never going to be done learning lessons. Neither are any of us. So it's impossible for him to have any sort of meaningful storyline with his history for him to not start off in a place of being wrong. And I think that's something that is misinterpreted because he starts off hermit-like, and we have that image. That image sticks in my head more than the image that I love of him at the end, because it's so effective. And I think that blinds a lot of people to the fact that this is one of the most hopeful Star Wars stories, because they have absolutely nothing. Every character has lost everything at this point. The rebels are a group of freaking 10 people in a minivan in space now. That's where we end. But there's more hope in that. You know, at the end, you're like, they're going to do this somehow because Luke said they could, you know, and I think that's beautiful. And I think,
so I was just going to say, especially that the final scene where we have the kids who, I mean, they sent the message out, no one came because hope had been lost in the galaxy. And Luke came back and reignited that hope for the entire galaxy. This was the most hopeful Luke that we've ever seen. And we can see that in these kids talking about Luke Skywalker and having little action figures and inspiring this next generation. We see how much hope he created in the very next film. And I just, yeah, it's actually beautiful how much hope. And just like every other Star Wars movie, no person, no organization or anything is perfect. But you can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. And this film even says that, you know, he failed because he thought he was up to the challenge. He thought he was the one to prevent the darkness in Ben. Like, they say this in the film, you know, I thought I could do it because I was Luke Skywalker, but I couldn't do it. If you are the only person that you think is capable of doing this and you fail, what are you? You know, and that's why I feel like a failure sometimes, and that's why his arc means something to me.
And the way he says, Leia trusted me with her son, like, breaks my heart. And I feel like people forget that. Like, Leia lost everything during the reign of the Empire.
Yeah, I think
she lost, you know, her entire planet. She lost what she saw as her family, but then finding out that she is the true daughter of Darth Vader, she lost her sense of identity too, which was never really explored in the originals. But just having that in mind, hearing Luke say, Leia trusted me with her son, like, her son was one of the only things that she had.
I also think that people mistake him exiling himself and cutting him off from the Force as withholding help. Luke is having a really intense bout of imposter syndrome. He thinks he's the farthest thing from help. You know, he thinks if he gets involved, it means something worse for Leia and worse for the rebellion. You know, and that's psychologically a brilliant thing to explore, of Luke Skywalker, who we all know could help and at the end does, thinks that his help isn't good enough. It's not what's going to save them. Yeah. And that's relatable.
And that's one of the reasons I loved him in The Mandalorian so much, because we got to see Luke at the height of his power, the thing that we wanted to see. Now, imagine, you know, that guy gets little baby Grogu, looks Mando in the eye and says, I will protect this child with my life. He lost every child that he was caring for at that temple. They're all gone. Imagine making that promise to every single one of their family. He failed all of those kids. He failed all of those children's families that trusted him with them. He failed Kylo Ren. He failed the Jedi organization as a whole. He failed his new organization by falling into the same trap as the previous one. He failed Leia. Like, imagine, how could you face your sister? She trusted you to help guide him through this darkness.
His best friend.
Yeah, it's and so like seeing him at the height of his power really shows how big that fall was. I just think it's great. But
I just really like this movie,
Yeah.
I think it's real neat.
He's living in perpetual blinders, because he did shut himself off from the Force. And so it's easy to think that like Luke is actively choosing not to help or anything like that. He exiled himself in penance, but in so doing, he cut himself from the Force. So he doesn't really know what's going on, like, to the greatest degree of detail. And we see a sudden shift in his facial performance.
He's so good.
The moment when he turns on the Force again, and Leia's in her little recovery bed and says, "Luke," and then he senses her again for after how many years, his face visibly changes from the rest of the previous how many minutes we got of him. And Mark Hamill's like, great. He's so great.
By the way, his performance is transcendent in this film. Like, yeah.
One great moment that I was, when I was watching the film, I was like, I want to mention it. I didn't mention it where I should have, but in the scene when he ignites the lightsaber in the truthful rendition of the three, I noticed he doesn't once look at the lightsaber because it's just his instinct. It's just what he has learned. You fight the dark side. So he feels dark, he doesn't look at it. He doesn't realize it until he actually does. And then that's when he turns it off. So it does it again. If he had taken it out and gone, boom, I'm going to, make this decision, there would have been that, then we would have had that, oh, he's trying to kill a kid for a bad dream. But that's not the case. The case is he had a fight or flight moment.
Yeah.
We've all said something bad to someone because it was our first instinct and wished we could apologize before it escalated. And Star Wars is just our experiences heightened. So that's what that is.
And it's such a beautiful echo of Luke's failure at the cave when Yoda told him, your weapons, you will not need them. If he didn't take his weapons, he would have passed the test. If he didn't take his weapon, he would have passed this test. And hearing, Yoda's final words to him, to pass on what you've learned. When I'm gone, the last Jedi you will be. Well, Luke finally did pass on what he learned. And he says, when I'm gone, I will not be the last Jedi. It's just beautiful. But, all right, Pep, Element 7, you are up. Who you going with?
So I'm going to talk about Luke. No, I'm just kidding. It's funny to think about this character and the following thoughts all in the same breath. The Last Jedi is the worst movie of the sequels. Finn was a wasted character. Those two, that's not 2 + 2 = 4 right there. Like he gets the most development in this movie. Just thinking about leaving the First Order and, taking part in the Starkiller base battle in the first movie. Okay, fine. Yeah, there's some transformation there, but that's not as big as what he goes through in this one. He's part of something bigger now, but he still has these sort of moments of self-preservation where he'd rather just run away from all of his problems. But this time he's at least evolved to caring about his friend, Rey. And so upon trying to escape, he's like, I have to warn her, I have to get out of here. This fleet is doomed. 5 minutes since being in front of like the war table with everyone is like, okay, what do we need to do? What do we need to do? He's like all up in the planning stages, everything. But as soon as the details and the prognosis of their survivability has diminished, he's ready to give up again. And his journey to a far corner of the galaxy. But when Haldo says, in the furthest corner or in the far corner of the galaxy, hope for the resistance still lives. And so in his little side quest, he gets to see that people are living in luxury and life is bustling, but there's also people suffering as well. And it was important for him to see that side of the galaxy because, he had to come to the realization that he just couldn't run. He was always going to face this, I keep on stealing Mateus' word, drapery of tragedy.
It's a good word, isn't it?
Yeah. And he has to, face the truth of the galaxy. This suffering needs to end, or at least you need to accept your part in ending it, or else all you're going to do is just, live a humdrum life and see suffering or suffer and be complacency will make you complicit in that suffering. And the journey we see from him going to, or realizing this truth and taking up arms against Phasma was amazing. Like, a part of me was disappointed that fight didn't play out as more than it was, but I was happy that it happened because that was leaving the First Order to begin with was where he refused to fire his blaster, and coming full circle to going to the Resistance, joining the Resistance cause, then thinking about leaving again, and only thinking about the good of him and his friends, to seeing how the galaxy actually lives, to going all the way back to the First Order and facing Phasma at the end there was a wonderful journey to have. And I dare everyone who says Finn was so underdeveloped, The Last Jedi is the worst movie of the sequels, to watch again and think about that sentence or those two thoughts together, and then think about how it turned into Ray for 2.5 hours in the next one.
Yeah, for some reason too, people like to cite like the John Boyega interview that he did, and people target The Last Jedi for some reason because of that. And to me, I feel like it devalues, because it has nothing to do with Finn as a character and everything to do with how John Boyega, the person, felt like he was treated. And I feel like it devalues that. That was what he was talking about in his interview. It had nothing to do with his character. And I just don't like that people use that as like an argument against the movie.
I mean, in all fairness, most of those people didn't read his interview.
That's true too.
I'm just gonna say, hard stop, because I see things about it, and people are like, yeah, and he hates Disney and all this stuff, and like, no, when you read it, he's specifically says like, no, this isn't like an I hate Disney. This industry needs to do better in handling people of color, and a lot of his complaints are actually about the toxic side of the fan base, but that's a whole different thing. But yeah. Oh, go ahead, Pat.
But the last thing I'll say is, we have to start letting these actors have their professional opinions, and let them be just that. Mark Hamill disagrees with the character, that's fine, but that shouldn't inform you or your opinion. You know, Sam Witwer says this. Okay, he said that. That's his opinion. You know, the way that some people elevate these
It was
people,
wrong
put
though.
yeah,
Like factually, but yeah, it is.
the way
An
some
opinion.
people will elevate and put actors or celebrities on a pedestal, and what they say as if it's like this, what they say reaffirms what I think because they're this celebrity or they're this character.
People are always going to seek that validation, you know, and I think you have to know where you're coming from. You know what I mean? We need a little more self-awareness when it comes to this kind of stuff of being like, yeah, I don't like this movie. I need to know that when I'm critiquing certain things that, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And when it comes to like professional like brainstorming and criticisms and stuff like that, and I'm sure Mateus knows this all too well, Mark Hamill did say this as well. Like, it happens all the time. No film goes through from start to finish, pre to post, and the actors were like, I agreed with everything that happened during production.
I've never been a character where I liked
everyone has their own. Yeah. And so, like, just final thing. Mark Hamill also disagreed with George Lucas on Return of the Jedi. He wanted Luke to fall to the dark side. And if he got what he wanted, he wouldn't have gotten Return of the Jedi.
He also wanted Luke
actors
to be
disagree.
He also wanted Luke to be ripped, shirtless, with a mohawk and a bunch of earrings. That's one thing he said in an interview. And then for Rise of Skywalker, he said he wanted to come back as a spooky Force Ghost.
I love him so much.
So do I. He's the best.
He is one of the sweetest guys on the planet. I had the fortune of meeting him at an event, and he spent 2 hours talking to me about just the industry and giving me advice, and what a classy guy. And again, he has his opinions, but he's also made it clear that they're his opinions, and he would rather people like this movie. You know, he'd rather people have a good time. He doesn't want people to dislike it, you know?
But even then, that's not even like a that's not even an indictment of the movie. Like,
no, what he said is also so little of a critique. Like,
it's like I disagreed with what I cooked for breakfast. It's like, well, yeah, well, your dinner sucked then. I mean, Mark Hamill disagreed with the direction of the character. He didn't say The Last Jedi was the most horrible movie of the sequels. He didn't, you know.
Yeah. So what you're saying?
So you're saying?
Also, what you were saying about Finn, though, just makes me think of how, because I didn't even really put Phasma in the mix as like I should have, right? Because you have Rose, who represents the rebellion, and you have, you know, she represents going all in on a cause because it's the right thing to do, right? DJ, he wants to run. DJ is, you know, sitting on the other shoulder saying, none of this matters anyways, because there are always going to be bad people, and there's always going to be crap. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. You do you. Get yours and get out. But Phasma is survive at all cost. Align yourself with the biggest, baddest people, and live there. And it's kind of sad to me that they kind of sidelined that storyline about Phasma.
Her deleted scene ending was great.
It was really good, yeah. Because, you know, she gets confronted with, she's the one that gave up the shield and all this stuff because all she cares about is survival. She's not actually loyal to the First Order either. And Finn could go that way too and only care about survival. And in the end, one of those has to win out, and that's what I love. But For myself, I am gonna have to go with my boy Ben. Yeah, I'm gonna go Kylo Ren because when we see Kylo Ren in this film, he's getting dressed down really badly, and
literally,
yeah, and he's been manipulated and cajoled his entire life. The speech that Snoke gives to him is the indication of exactly where he stands. And the sad part is that he kind of stands that way with his family too. He's looked at like a legacy. He's named after the great Ben Kenobi, and he's the offspring. He has this mighty Skywalker blood within him, and he trained under Luke Skywalker. Everyone is expecting something from him, and he has tried to be all of it at some point, and he's never been able to be that. He needs to find a way to be himself, and that's really what his journey is. And he's the opposite and the same as Rey in that, because she comes from nothing, but he comes from everything. Doesn't matter which side of the coin you're coming from, you still have to discover yourself. He took it the wrong way and said, kill the past, what does it say? Forget the past, kill it if you have to. That's not learning from your failure. And that's kind of the the purpose of this film. And even though he finally succeeds in stepping into his own when he kills Snoke. He kills his abuser, his oppressor, and starts to move forward. But he loses himself, and he's now this same rabid cur that we were referred to in the end. He did exactly what he was supposed to, and he ended up with nothing and with no one. His closest confidant wants to kill him. So I just, when I see him, I think of the end of Willy Wonka of you lose, you get nothing. Good
day, sir.
And he looks up, and you see the last connection that he has with Rey. And the beautiful part is he at no point lies to her. He really does want to be accepted for who he is. And he's telling her all these things that he believes to be true. Even when he talks about his experience with Luke, what he was saying, he said what he believed. Obviously, he was twisted, and he was thinking only of himself and his power and potentially losing it. And that last connection with Rey, and she shuts the door on him. And at that moment, and he picks up the dice, and they disappear. He is alone. He has nothing. Good job. It's really sad, but I really love that his journey in this film as well. But all right, I want to thank you. I know this was a long one. Thank you guys for being willing to kind of hang out with me and just nerd out. I was so excited to do this.
One quick thing.
Yes.
I totally failed to bring this up during the conversation. We don't need to discuss it, but Snoke, he did not bridge their dyad. He was a three-way caller, and he hung up as soon as the two of them answered.
Yeah.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself.
He's the kid in middle school who's like, oh, I know these two people like each other, so I'm going to put them in a group chat, and then I'm going to leave the group chat.
Yes,
they're forced to talk to each other.
They were already connected. He just kind of did a thing,
Okay, well, let's go ahead and just we'll go around. Any quick closing thoughts you guys have, as well as where to find you, your guys' awesome content, and your sick ass earrings. And start with Brooke. So Mateus.
I am at Mateus Ward, MateusWard on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. I'm an actor, so there's a chance you'll see me in the future. If you want to go see something that I had done, I'd acted in and produced. There's a film called Relish on Amazon. Very proud of it. If you want to be like, this guy thinks he's talking a lot about film, let's see what he did, then you could challenge me there. You can go watch
Rogue Squadron.
Yeah.
I prefer pickles to relish, but go on.
I feel you. So yeah, you can find me there. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok, and I'm around. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so follow him. He does awesome content. He does awesome like little sketches, and he naturally just turns into Kylo Ren. But his Han Solo and Lando is pretty good as well as others. So check him out. And how about you, Pep or Element 7?
Yes, you can find me on TikTok at _element7_. I will take your questions. I will answer them for all things Star Wars. We are a welcoming bunch. You know, if you don't know anything, I will have you know it. And that's the point of my channel. Also, tune in this Sunday if you're interested in discussing with me and Chaco on Diet in the Force, the open world game that's coming from Lucasfilm Games. We're going to dive deep onto that, do some game pitches, and do a little bit of a mini game design doc on the podcast. And I'm on my socials are in my link tree. Just go to my bio and go to my link tree. They're all there. They're all different, which just I hate how Element 7 was so prevalent and taken on all platforms. But what you gonna do?
Yeah, and Yido Gaming wants you to know that you are the GOAT, and I for one agree with that.
What was their name?
Yido Gaming.
Like Yeet?
Yep.
Oh, thank you, Yido Gaming.
And last but certainly not least, Brooke, BDazzler.
Yeah. Well, you can find me B_Dazzler on TikTok. I think I'm BDazzler95 on Instagram because BDazzler was taken. I don't really post a lot on Instagram though. So TikTok, I mostly post things about mostly Star Wars, lots of things about The Last Jedi and character development and a lot of funny stuff and all that good things. And if you would like to purchase a pair of lovely Star Wars earrings, you can go to Far Far Away Factory on Etsy. And I sell more than just earrings, but lots of other stuff too.
Awesome. All right. Well, I love you guys. Thank you for hanging out with me. This was every week. I feel like it's my favorite discussion, but this one truly is. But may the Force be with you always.
Force be with you.
We're all the Republic.
We are all the
light
Republic.
and
And also with you.